Welcome to BBC World News, live from Pretoria. Our headlines. Oscar Pistorius is back in court to be sentenced for the killing of his girlfriend, Reeva Steenkamp.
And here in London, I'm Geeta Gurumuthy with our other top stories this hour. Liberian nurses and medical assistants threaten a national strike. They want more money to take the risk of treating Ebola patients. And scuffles on the front line in Hong Kong, where pro-democracy protesters are attacked by groups of masked men.
Hello and welcome back to Pretoria. Today we're here for the beginning of the sentencing hearing for Oscar Pistorius, convicted 1 month ago of culpable homicide in the killing of his girlfriend, Reeva Steenkamp. And the court's been in session for around an hour before adjourning for tea. We're expecting the session to resume in around 15 minutes. But we've been hearing from a psychologist who's been treating Oscar Pistorius since just after he shot dead Reeva Steenkamp, and she is a witness for the defence. Her name is Dr. Vera Hartzenberg. She's been talking about how Oscar Pistorius has been affected by killing his girlfriend and the trauma that he's suffered. She even went so far as to say he's been suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Let's listen to a little of what she told the court a short while ago.
Frequently, he was too emotionally drained for therapy to commence, and sessions had to be rescheduled. He frequently spent sessions weeping and often had to exit or excuse himself from a session due to retching. This mainly occurred when recounting his sensory perceptions of the shooting incident. Besides the retching, he presented with obvious physical symptoms of perspiring, a pale pallor, trembling, pacing up and down, which are all typical signs of anxiety and trauma. Point 3, recurring therapeutic themes. 3.1, loss of Miss Reeva Steenkamp. Mr. Pistorius was deprived of the opportunity to mourn the passing and loss of someone he loved immediately after the incident, as a result of the charge of premeditated murder, as well as the ever-present media focused on him. He was saddened that he could not attend Ms. Steenkamp's memorial service and funeral. This would usually offer closure to a grieving person.
Well, that's a little of what Dr. Hartzenberg told the court. She's been called by the defence to try to prove that Oscar Pistorius has suffered already greatly since he shot Reeva Steenkamp dead, and that the court should not impose a custodial sentence. And this pre-sentencing arguments is a bit like a mini trial in its own right. We've heard now a cross-examination of the same witness, Dr. Hartzenberg, by Karin, the lead counsel for the state, and he's been tough on her. He's been questioning her, as we've seen him question other witnesses during the course of the trial itself. Very, very firmly asking her why she's not focusing on the grief and the suffering of the family of Reeva Steenkamp. Why is it all about Oscar? But let's talk to Brenda Wardle, who's a legal analyst. And Brenda, what do we make of what we've seen so far? It has been almost like a little trial in itself. Karin being quite tough on this witness. What does it gain?
Well, I don't think he's going to gain much. There are two critical witnesses that are going to be called by the defense. The first is the probation officer, and the second is someone from correctional services, because without those two reports, correctional supervision cannot be imposed. So the Criminal Procedure Act is clear that those two reports must be available. Now, those witnesses have to be as objective as possible. They have to interrogate the crime itself, the impact of this offense on the family, on the public, in South Africa as a whole, and on Oscar himself. So this is where I think Karin should actually focus his energies. But that vigorous cross-examination is really just, I think, aimed at point scoring, and it doesn't really add much to what Dr. Hartzenberg had to say.
Now, Judge Mazipa has a very large remit here, because there is no minimum sentence for culpable homicide, yet there is a maximum of 15 years in prison. It's a huge range.
A huge range, and if we have a look at another case that was decided in the Supreme Court of Appeal, similar instance where a man stabbed his girlfriend to death, Ngubane, sentenced to 10 years for murder conviction set aside, on appeal, substituted with culpable homicide, and he received a 7-year imprisonment term. And we must remember that in terms of our doctrine of precedent, Judge Masipa is also guided. Obviously, this case has its own merits, but she is also guided by the Supreme Court of Appeal and the Constitutional Court.
For a time scale, are we in the dark until at least we've seen how long it takes with this witness? It might be the same with a succession of others.
Yes, but the defense, I think, are only going to call about 3 to 4 witnesses, meaning that there are 2 to 3 witnesses to go, and we might see the trial wrapped up this week.
I just want to get your perspective over the last month since this trial adjourned after conviction. What has been the response in South Africa to the fact that Oscar Pistorius will not be convicted of murder? He is convicted of the lesser charge of culpable homicide.
Well, the majority of South Africans, and this includes laypersons, feel that Judge Masipa erred in not finding Oscar Pistorius guilty on the charge of murder. And the legal profession, I can't even say that they are divided, because the majority in the legal profession are saying that there were errors in law made by Judge Masipa.
What could that lead to? Are we looking at possible appeal by the state, the prosecution, once the sentencing has been concluded?
Yes, obviously they have to wait for sentencing to be concluded, and then the state has, I think, 2 weeks within which to apply to Judge Masipa for leave to appeal, and if she then refuses, then they can petition the judge president for leave to appeal. And if that is granted, they could go the route of the Supreme Court of Appeal or even the Constitutional Court, because I think that there are very important and fundamental legal principles that need to be settled that arise from the Pistorius judgment.
Going back to the sentencing, what is it that we're trying to get out of this? Are the legal arguments now by the wayside? Is this all about what is appropriate for a punishment of one individual?
Yes, that is all. It's the triad of Zen, a sentence that must be suitable to the offender, to the community or society in general, and must be befitting of the crime. At the end, that is the balancing act that Judge Masipa will actually have to exercise.
Brenda, thank you very much for your perspective so far. So we're waiting for court proceedings to resume once again, and then we expect the cross-examination of this particular defence witness possibly to resume, and then perhaps we'll be hearing from those next succession of witnesses that Brenda mentioned. For the moment, it's back to you in London.
Karin, thanks very much. Speak to you very soon. If you want to keep across what's happening, all our correspondents inside and outside court are on Twitter, at Karin BBC, at BBC Andrew H, he's inside court, and at Nomsa_Maseko.